What's up, everyone, and welcome to Designated Reports Boxing Podcast, episode 20. As you already know, I'm Louie, your host. This is Gene, also your host. What up, Gene?
What's good, man?
Ain't nothing. You know, we got a lot of boxing to catch up on. Well, I feel like if this was an actual season, we're getting into the meat and potatoes of the season. Okay. So there's going to be like a lot of fights coming up that we're excited about. But I wanted to ask you, before we get into like some of our topics, what's the best fight you've ever been to personally?
The best fight I've been to. Woo. All right, so this happened 2 years ago.
Okay.
It was in December, so it was at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn.
Nice.
Right. It was headlined by both of the Charlo brothers, and I think it was Jamal Charlo actually lost his first fight against Harrison out of Detroit.
Right.
Right. And the reason why that was the best fight I went to, because I think you've seen it on my Insta story, so.
I already know where you're going.
And
with
it happened this weekend as well, and the Ruiz fight, right?
Yeah, go crazy.
So we're watching the fight, and I hear a melee in the back, and I turn around. It's like a 30-man Royal Rumble.
Crazy,
right? And
I remember being like, and the funny thing, I was like, "Yo, you didn't invite me?" Like. It was like I only had like one ticket or something like that.
So we had action in the front, action in the back, but I'm gonna keep it a stack. Like the fight in the back was popping though, man.
Oh, I'm sure.
One buddy was getting worked so much that his girl jumped in and started like swinging the purse.
So that's where he's definitely a keeper for sure.
Nah, she a rider, man. You know you're getting your ass whipped when your girl gotta jump in.
Yeah,
right?
that's a tough one to live out.
But it was Barclays Center. That's my favorite fight that I've been to.
So what happened actually with the fight though, like the real fight?
Like I said, it was a split decision. One Charlo brother won, and Jermell won his. I think he ended the fight. I think he was the main event, and he ended up winning. So it was a controversial decision. They ended up fighting again, and he was victorious in that second one.
Oh, that was actually Tony Harrison,
Tony
right?
Harrison out of Detroit,
right? Who we interviewed. Brother Fareed, who actually worked with him, I think, after that fight, right?
Yes, yep. Yeah. No, I think it was, he helped him with the first fight.
Oh, in the second fight, he got away. That's what it was, yep. Good call, man, good call.
Yeah, but it was a good fight, in and out the ring. What about yourself?
I went to a great fight. I don't have that good of a story like yours, like, you know what I'm saying, wasn't that much popping. But I went to the Floyd Mayweather versus Miguel Cotto fight out in Vegas. And at the time, and Miguel Cotto still is one of my favorite fighters. And at the time, like, I knew Mayweather was the superior fighter, but like I was rooting for Cotto, right? Yeah. And we went to like.
Is it because he's Puerto Rican?
I mean, bro, like, why you being racist, though? Nah, it's like, okay, that's part of it.
Yeah, no,
that's part of it. But at the same time, like, he literally, like, if you Miguel Cotto literally fought everybody. So there's nobody in the sport of boxing that does not respect Miguel Cotto.
That's a fact.
Right?
That's a fact.
So that's kind of like, you know, part of it too. So anyway, so like we literally got there, because a lot of times with the pre-fights, you only get to see like maybe 3 of them on television. So we got there like 5 o'clock and we literally watched every fight. And I literally called the decisions for every fight and I got them all right. Yo, I swear, I was like, yo, it's a draw, it's a draw, it's a draw, it's a draw. Yo, I ain't gonna lie, when they basically gave it to Floyd, I was in there mad. I was all the way back in the nosebleeds, and I was, you know, motherfucking cuss out. That's a goddamn draw. Okay. Like legit, like.
So what happened when you watched the replay of the fight?
Floyd had it 7-5. You know, because I was all in the back, you know what I mean? So I ended up watching it on the big screen, and you know what I mean. But what I saw was, you know, obviously Cotto was pressing the fight, and he was staying on top of him, but. Went back, you know, watched it out volume, and I was like, all right, Floyd, you know.
Yo, somebody just said, one of the announcers this past weekend said something that when you're watching these fights, you have to watch with your eyes and not your ears, because the crowd will have you thinking that a fighter's performing.
Or even the commentators, especially if they're like on a certain network, or if they're, you know what I'm saying, some type of like connection. Sometimes the commentators will be like
super biased.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, so that's why you gotta turn the volume down. All right, so those are 2 great stories. I think yours is a little bit better. Talking about melees and Royal Rumbles, we actually had Andy Ruiz fight Chris Arreola this weekend.
Yes.
There was another Royal Rumble in the crowd. We'll get to that. Let's talk about the main fight. I'm gonna let you kick off. You know, what did you see? What did you like about this fight in particular?
All right, so I'll play good cop with Andy, right? Okay. First of all, he's one of my favorite heavyweight fighters right now. Ever since the AJ fight, You know, he's been on the main front, but I was looking to see his performance from a long layoff, right? He didn't fight at all last year. Most of it was because of COVID, right? So he fought in December of 2019. I wanted to see if he still had the hand speed. I wanted to see if he wasn't scared to mix it up, and he hit every check that I had for him, right? One thing about Andy, you might knock him down, you're not gonna knock him out, right? I think he has the fastest hands in the heavyweight division.
Pretty fucking fast.
All right, but the only thing, and I'll give him a B+ performance. I think we'll see who the real Andy Ruiz is within his next fight. This was like almost a tune-up fight for hopefully a big fight.
Right.
But every question that I had about him, he answered. Because when he settled down in the 5th, it was over. Actually, the 6th. Once the 6th round came, he was in cruise control.
Right.
He was throwing combos. His 1-2-3 is probably the best 1-2-3 in boxing right now.
It's pretty good 1-2-3.
Yo, phenomenal. Yeah, so I'll give him a B+ performance.
All right. Well, look, you know, I'm here to play bad cop, but you know, the way you just broke it down, it's gonna be hard to play bad cop.
Yeah.
He did do a lot of positive things, but I'm gonna go ahead and judge him off of his highest point, right? So, at one point, he was the heavyweight champion of the world.
Yep.
He obviously dethroned Anthony Joshua. So I'm looking at him from, you know, that's who you should be going forward.
Okay.
Obviously, with the Joshua loss, we know there was a lot of stuff that, you know, he kind of got in his head, he got in his own bag. So I wanted to see who he was going to be coming into this fight. And there was a lot of good things that I did see, but when I compare this performance to the guys that he could fight next, I don't know if this guy is beating those guys.
Why not?
For example, Ariola's strategy was letting Andy come in, and he got clipped, right?
Okay.
So, you know, he's going to fight guys that are taller than him, right? So one of the things that I wanted to see was how is he going to work on guys who say, all right, AJ gave us the blueprint of moving our feet and hitting them from the outside. How is he going to handle that? Now, obviously, Chris Ariola is a little bit older, and, you know, he doesn't have the punching power that some of these other guys have. Because you know, one of the fights I want to see is with him and actually Deontay Wilder.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at it that standpoint, like, yo, if he had a hard time with Chris Ariola, he's certainly going to have a hard time with Deontay Wilder. Even who I think the next guy should be is actually Luis Ortiz.
Okay.
Right? So I'm going off of, you know, his highest peak. Was he back at that level? I didn't see it.
All right, but let me ask you this, right? So he beat AJ, he beat Chris, who had better advantages in every stat than him, right? I'm saying he's in better shape now. This was his first fight with a new camp who has a totally different approach in fighting, right? You can do all the sparring in the world, but as soon as you step in the ring against an actual opponent, all that shit go out the window. So I'm saying with everything that he's done to transform his body, to transform his mind, you know, to start off with a new camp, I kind of felt like he was fighting like Canelo in the first few rounds. After he settled down, he took over the fight. So I can't really say I will judge him based off his AJ fight. I want to say, okay, you've done a 180. Let's see where you can continue from that point on.
No, like I said, like, you obviously played a really good cop. That's why I said it's going to be a little bit more challenging for me to play bad cop. I didn't see this performance and think of Andy Ruiz as, okay, you know, this guy can get Tyson Fury out of there. He can come back and beat AJ. And like I said, like, I'm obviously now questioning, can he even beat Deontay Wilder? Now, is he still a top 5 heavyweight? Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
All right, so, you know, going back a couple weeks, we actually had a big puncher, big prospect that everybody's excited about. A Brooklyn kid in Edgar Berlanga. Obviously, you know, his fight went, I think, for the first time all the way, right? 8 rounds.
Yep.
Yeah, so the guy definitely was a little bit more battle-tested. What did you not like or like in Edgar Berlanga's performance? Excuse me.
So this is where we're going to switch. I'm going to play bad cop, but I can only be bad cop to a certain extent, right?
Right.
With this kid, I mean, what more can I say? He only needs a better opponent.
Yeah.
Right? I can't critique him for what he did in the ring because he looked phenomenal. He's able to throw every single punch, right? He's a high volume puncher. He's never hurt. So I can only say, hey, put him in there with a better fighter and then let's see what happens. Like from a fighting standpoint, I didn't see anything technically wrong in his technique or in his game plan. He was never hurt. Put him in there with a banger.
Yeah.
That's the only bad cop I can be.
Yeah, no, I look, you know, obviously, you know, we're really, you know, looking for the flaws in when we're playing bad cop. I'll say this. I think that he might have got touched a little bit more than I'd like to see from a guy who didn't seem to be a big puncher.
Okay.
Right. So to your point, like, let's see if he gets in there with a guy. Okay, yeah, this guy was tough enough and had heart to last, because I think the guy got dropped 3 times.
Like 4.
So 4 times. So clearly, like, the guy was in it to fight.
Yeah.
Now, did he have the tool set to actually win the fight? No.
Do you think his conditioning, because he was 16-0, every single fight only lasted the first round.
Yeah.
So do you think him getting touched was due to the fact that he was in the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th round, and he kind of let his guard down?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I think experience comes into play. You know, obviously, if he started fast and thought he was going to get that guy out of there, maybe he burned a little bit more energy in the first part of the fight. So that's a really good point. But nonetheless, if he's in there with a guy who actually could really, really touch him up, he gets clipped like that, you know, from a guy who's a little bit heavier, more experienced, a little bit more of a power puncher. You know, it's hard to say, like, what would actually happen, you know what I mean? But like you said, it's like, you know, we're looking for flaws. But there's a lot to like about this dude. Obviously, we're in his corner. But now I think we want to see him step up in terms of the competitors, like the A+, you know, A+ or A- B+ fighters.
Yeah. And there's plenty out there. So
yeah, especially in that weight class. Yeah. All right, so now moving on to somebody who's always in the headlines. More recently, he's been in the headlines for saying he's going to fight Tank and then Pacquiao, and then he got signed up with Javier Fortuna. But obviously, we're talking about Ryan Garcia. He has pulled out of that fight for mental health reasons. For me, it's really hard to talk about somebody who's, you know, making a decision for their mental health.
Yeah.
You know, if I had one critique, it would be that up until this point where he pulled out, he was literally all over the place.
Yeah.
Right.
Doing too much.
Right. You know what I'm saying? So it's almost like, listen, you want to be respectful of anybody and what they're going through, but you know, you just don't know if it's you know, like a market, right, like a marketing tactic or something like that. You know, like I said, it's not something we want to play with or not take seriously. So I do hope that, you know, he is doing well. What did you think about the whole, you know, breaking news when it came out?
I think athletes of today are very cognizant of their mental health. Him being a young guy and coming out and saying that he needs a break because he's always in the spotlight, you know, I had to tip my hat and applaud him, you know. Going back to the point that you just said, I hope this isn't a market ploy, but Ryan's been, you know, he's been going through some things. Right now he's dabbling in a lot of spirituality. He's going to church more. You know, he's always playing like gospel music on his IG. So when he came out and made this statement, like I believed him, you know, and if he is going through anything, I want to see him get the help that he needs and come back fighting stronger. Because at the end of the day, he's still, what, 21, 22 years old? Yeah, he has a full career in front of him. And you don't let anyone in your camp or your family pressure you to fight if you're not ready to fight. Because when you do fight, we want to see the best Ryan Garcia. And we don't want to see any excuses for why you went in that ring.
100%.
Facts, right? So,
yeah, big facts.
You know, I tip my hat out to him. I love that these athletes aren't scared to say, hey, I'm going through shit.
Yeah, and, you know, just to say it again, you know, we wish him, you know, speedy recovery, good health, and, you know, obviously that comes before being an athlete. So take care of yourself. All right, so now this is a good segue because that was a fight that's not happening.
Yeah. And
now we're about to talk about fights that aren't happening, right? And it seems to be like there was obviously going back to a little bit earlier in the year, Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. And then it was Terrence Crawford and Manny Pacquiao. And now then it was Spence and then Pacquiao. And that's just like amongst, you know, the welterweight division. Now we're also hearing that Tyson Fury in the AJ fight might not happen.
Might not. But today there was breaking news that they're close to signing a contract.
So I'll tell you what, like, how do you feel about all these big name fights being thrown out there, you know, not coming to fruition as not only as a boxing fan, but like, you know, somebody who knows the sport? Like, what are your thoughts?
All right. Did this type of tactics happen in the 80s and 90s? Because I don't remember.
You know what? It did, but I don't think it happened to this extent. Obviously, with social media, news gets out faster, and then, I've been saying this since we started the podcast, that guys definitely use other guys' name to stay relevant while they don't have a fight or, something like that. So it's hard for me to say that about Manny Pacquiao because he doesn't need to do that.
Yeah.
So, and then going back to Manny Pacquiao, now it's like, I think it's back to like Mikey Garcia.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So it did happen, in the 80s and 90s, but I think it was a little less in the way that it was done.
What's pissing me off is you say, okay, what have we been talking about since day one of this podcast? We aren't seeing fights because of COVID, correct?
Yep.
So all these fighters sat out for a year. They had a year to negotiate. Everything's opening back up. Right? So now there's no excuses for why these fights aren't being made.
Yeah.
Right? If you have a guy like Bob Arum who's always complaining about, fighters getting this much or, increasing or growing revenue, then your top two guys that you promote should fight. What's stopping them?
Yeah, I mean, they want to protect the cash cow. You know what I'm saying? That's ultimately what it comes down to.
How many more fights does Manny Pacquiao have left?
That's right? A really good question.
What's that game where everyone gets up from the chair and they run and they... What's that shit called?
Was it Duck Duck Goose? Musical chairs?
Musical chairs,
musical
right?
Chairs. Yeah.
It's just like, at this point, if they told me, Tyson Fury was going to fight Hulk Hogan next, I'd believe it.
Right,
just get the fights made. And remember, we gave kudos to Eddie Hearns for being the best promoter just this last podcast.
Yep.
But he's with the nonsense too. But he's not with it to the extent of the other promoters. But if you're trying to make money and there's a bunch of fights, there's literally 5 or 6 fights that we really want to see, and these guys match up, and you've been gone for a year, there's no reason why that these fights aren't being made when you got to do like Canelo, who's fighting 5 times a year.
Yeah, man. I mean, listen, you just went off. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've really got nothing to add to that because 100% I agree with you. Especially with, like you said, Manny Pacquiao, Terrence Crawford, Bud. And then the heavyweight division, like, we're all waiting for those 2 guys because everything's going to trickle down if that fight gets made or doesn't get made.
Who is Deontay Wilder going to fight? He hasn't fought in 2 years.
Right. And then that's what we were just talking about with Andy. Obviously, there's other guys like Otto Wallin and then the Alexander Usyk.
Yeah.
So those are some guys at the top. But, like, do we really want to see those?
I wouldn't mind seeing it.
I mean, but the fight that we want to see.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah, man, I'm with you. We're on the same time with that. These big fights need to be made, especially coming out of COVID where a lot of fights couldn't get made. Now's the time to actually do it.
Yeah, there's no excuses.
Yeah.
There's no excuses. There's, like you said, there's 5 or 6 pretty good heavyweights. But if you look at every division, it's really 2 fighters in each division that's holding everything up. You look at the 147, it's 2 fighters. It's Spence, Crawford holding everything up. Right. Heavyweight, Tyson Fury and AJ's holding everyone up. Figure it out.
Yeah, no, for sure. Sometimes they have tournaments, but I think with some of these guys that, they've gotten so big that, they're not even going to go down that right and having those kind of tournaments inside their division, to figure out who's going to fight who, you know what I mean?
But see, to me, that's ego because, like, you're guaranteed AJ, Tyson Fury, you're not making no less than 300 mil. So what the fuck is stopping y'all? Go fight in Saudi Arabia.
Listen, man, when the bag is that big, everybody wants a little bit more.
Come to Harlem. Fight in Harlem.
At the Apollo.
Make it happen, man. Like, I don't want to sound like I'm bitching, but I gave y'all a year to figure this shit out, man.
Nah, big facts.
And we need content too.
Yeah, come on, man. Come on, we keep talking about the same
shit.
But it ain't happening. It's not happening,
bro. Like, y'all fucking our content game up too.
Big facts. Big facts.
Word, man.
All right, well, that's episode 20. Obviously, we feeling the kind of way about these big fights not happening. Hopefully, by the time we get the next episode going, we'll get some news on that. Gene, let them know where they can find us, bro.
Yes, you can find all our videos on YouTube on the Designated Report channel. You can find all our audio on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, SoundCloud, or any streaming platform. Subscribe and like.